Hi, and welcome to a new season of Coffee with the Authors, a series of conversations about the art, craft, and process of writing. I'm Sarah Bearup-Neal, gallery manager with the Glen Arbor Art Center, and today I'm in conversation with Mike Delp, Northern Michigan poet, essayist, teacher, and fly fisherman. For years, Mike has been speaking to the beauty of streams and fresh water and the aggressions against it through the unfiltered voice of his literary doppelganger, the Mad Angler. I'll be talking with Mike about a new edition of the Mad Angler poems and the device of building a character through which to speak. Hi, Mike.
Hi, Sarah. Very good to see you. Nice to be here. Thank you.
And
Thank you
vice,
very much.
you're so welcome. A new edition, a new edition of the Mad Angler poems was published last year in 2024. So for those people who have not met him, tell us who the Mad Angler is and how did you meet him?
Oh boy. The Mad Angler, at one point, the Mad Angler was a persona that I adopted to speak about water and rivers and uh, especially about water and rivers and politics. And as as it became increasingly more dangerous for water in this country, I became more vocal about it. And there's a thin veil between the Mad Angler and myself now, if there is one at all.
Mhm.
I don't make any I don't pretend that there is, because he to me he speaks truth to power. I hope. A phrase that Jim Olson, my dear friend Jim Olson, often uses, which is especially at this time, is so critical that we do that. Um, and so I met him probably. I met him when I read Wendell Berry's Mad Farmer poems, which was in the 70s. And I love Wendell Berry's Mad Farmer poems. So, excuse me, I kind of stole the idea, and then it just took over. It was fun. I could say whatever I wanted, which I do anyway. But now it's more focused. It's a lot more focused
On what?
on the aggressions against, as you said, the aggressions against water, the aggressions against us as human beings who, without water, will die, and the efforts by all kinds of private interest groups and evil politicians to make us think that these issues aren't important, when in fact uh, water is the issue. I mean, without water, we die, especially in the Great Lakes Basin. We are so blessed to have this water around us. And without that, we don't have anything. And if we don't protect it, there are lots of social issues that are important, but this is vital. This is vital. And I worry that in the Trump administration, that it's going to get um, sidetracked somehow, because that's how he does everything. So the Mad Angler, I think, is going to try to be even more of a presence in the next few years.
Let me screen share for a second and I'll get a picture of the book up here. There we go. It's a beauty.
Yeah, it's awful pretty.
Who did
Glenn
the,
Wolfe did that.
yeah, go ahead.
Glenn Wolfe did the engraving, the lithograph, and the photo. It was taken from a photograph by Troy Anderson, whose family owns the Iron Fish Distillery, and Troy is a brilliant cinematographer and photographer. So he came out to the cabin one afternoon, and we were doing some promotional stuff for Mad Angler whiskey, And I asked him if he could take it. I've always wanted a picture taken directly facing the camera so that the fly would drop right in front of the camera and you could see the fly. And he did that. And I I was just dumbfounded. And Glenn Wolfe and Jerry Dennis, two of the finest artists we um, have had a long collaboration together, and I've always envied that relationship that they have. And when I approached Glenn, he said, "Yeah, I'll do it." And so I'm just immensely pleased to be working with Glenn and to see the cover. It's other than the old guy in it. Uh, I like it very much.
The book opens with a manifesto, which lays out the Mad Angler's point of view. And that's to remind us, I'm quoting the Mad Angler, to remind us of the power of hydrology. Would you like to read a little bit from the manifesto?
Sure. I'll read the first. My voice is still a little compromised from being
Okay,
ill. So how about if I read the first two stanzas?
sure,
Okay.
go right ahead.
The Mad Angler's Manifesto. I speak with the voice of water, rivulet, brook, stream, and creek, for white water in lost gorges, boiling cataracts, every place where the souls of wild fish gather to remind us of the power of hydrology. I speak with the name of rain, the soft lips of condensation, even the dew which gathers each night, every drop another transition from sky to earth. I invoke masses of insects to take over the world, begin the hatching and mating, sure in the fact that tomorrow another dam will fail, another levee crumble, another river where you live will tire of its banks and seek retribution on your lawn, running up your driveway and into your basement. I praise the flash flood, the artesian well, the flowing hearts under our feet, the webs of underground rivers coursing through solid rock. I fish in incantations, genuflections, my body a living marker for the crest gauge, tidal fluctuation, flood tides, and freshwater seeches. When my eye falls on rivers, I praise their transparency, their nature shaping their way as they move.
You know, Mike, Martin Luther hammered his theses on the door of the Lutheran Church. And this kind of has the same feeling about it. The manifesto is really putting the powers that be on notice.
Yeah, I hope so. I hope so. I mean that from my perspective, that's a little high-minded. Because you never know. I mean, you write a poem, and I mean, who reads poems? And uh, I just had a thought that what I'd really like to do is get some vinyl copies of it made. Of the manifesto, like 8 by 10,
Mhm.
with an adhesive back, and maybe print a couple million of them. And every time I see a Tesla, uh, put it on the hood, uh, in the top, in the windows, and um, or just put it on Elon's forehead. I don't know. You can see where my mind is right now. I've really had it with all this stuff. So
Yeah, it's clear, and um, that kind of feeling always makes me think about how lucky people are when they have some kind of creative practice that they can
mhm,
use as another way of talking about the things in the world that are bothering them or are preoccupying their brain pan.
mhm. Well, I mean, it's essential that art to create art is revolution. That's what it is. I remember one time years ago, John Lennon was interviewed about a Beatles song. I can't remember the song. And the reporter said, "Is this an anti-war song?" And John Lennon said, "Every song is an anti-war song." And that's the level of resistance that has to take place. And artists all over the world, and musicians and painters and just everybody has to rise up and let these people know what they're doing is immoral and illegal.
Well, poetry is especially interesting tool for doing that.
Mhm.
By the very nature of poetry, generally speaking, you've got a limited amount of real estate. So you really have to marshal your thoughts
Mhm.
to make your point.
Right. If you go back to poets like Neruda
Mhm.
in his efforts to take on the government, you can see how powerful a voice poetry is to take on the powers that be.
Mhm.
Um, it's harder in this culture because you know poets and writers are marginally famous.
Mhm.
I mean, most poets could walk down any street in America and nobody know who they were. Um, and like let's say Gary Snyder, who happens to be one of my favorite poets, who's still alive. If he walked down this street in Traverse City, a couple people might recognize him because he's been here. But other than that, nobody would know who he was. But if Travis Kelce walks down Main Street, the whole town's going to be there. So, uh, so there is that part of it that begs to be heard. I mean, you want to be heard. Uh, Interestingly, you want to be heard, but you don't want to be bothered. That's one of my quirks. I want to be listened to, but I don't want to be bothered.
Well, it's always hard to track somebody with the dogs into the water, so just stay in the stream. They
Hmm.
won't get your scent.
No, no, they won't. And where I am in the water is pretty secluded. And when I go fishing for innumerable reasons, the least of which is to catch fish. And there are times when I'm on the river, and if I see people coming, I'll just hide. I'll get out and sit in the brush until they go by. It's not a social
Mhm.
contract with me. But every once in a while, I'll forget myself and end up in an hour-long conversation. Uh, End up trading flies with somebody or drinking a beer, or so it's all relative to how I'm feeling at any given point during the day.
There's other notable characters from literature that are in the same kind of brain space that the Mad Angler is. Um, you mentioned Wendell Berry's The Mad Farmer. Um, another one that I truly love is Skink, who's Carl Hyacins, AWOL Florida governor that Carl brings back. In Skink appears in and out of a lot of Carl's novels. So talk a little bit about the literary convention of creating a character through which to speak. Is this an act of ventriloquism, do you think?
Oh, that's a great question. An active ventriloquism. Uh, well, yeah, in a way it is. It's like puppetry, where you get to create this thing out in front of you, and you're
Mm-hmm.
behind it,
Mm-hmm.
and you get to move it around with your hand and make it talk, and
Mm-hmm.
uh, and it's kind of like the Wizard of Oz, maybe,
Mm-hmm.
that you can hide behind that that mask, the persona, and say whatever you want to say. But to me, it's incumbent upon people to not hide anymore, to just openly oppose what they don't like and what they think is unfair, illegal, immoral, unchristian, un-American, you name it. We can't be silent anymore. And I suspect that the mad angler is going to get more and more directed toward politics than he is already. I mean, he's already involved in a lot of politics, but people have to speak. It's that simple.
Is there anything the Mad Angler was able to say that Mike Delp didn't feel comfortable saying out loud at
No,
any time?
no, no. Because the conceit is that you get up and you say, oh, I'm going to read some Mad Angler poems, and there is not one person in the audience who says, geez, I wonder who the Mad Angler is. It's not.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a secret. And so it gives you now I have a more of a license. And, truth be told, I'm probably pretty arrogant and obnoxious about it. If I'm doing a reading, because I do a lot of preaching about water
Mm-hmm.
to the choir.
Mm-hmm.
And the people that need to hear this stuff about water don't get it. I mean, they don't understand how they vote and what their vote means when it comes to resources. I mean, it's just incredible that you would vote against your own self-interest when it comes to water. And the person that's really helped me, the people that have really helped me with this are Jim Olson, Grant Parsons, Dave Dempsey, just fierce water people who are they're not afraid, and that's what it takes.
And Jim, whom you've mentioned, is the guy who wrote the book on wetlands protection law in Traverse City, Michigan, at least. Grant Parsons is another advocate and practicing attorney. And Dave Dempsey is kind of a hero among conservation people for all his advocacy, especially through the organization Flow for love of water here in Traverse City.
Yeah, Dave is just a policy wonk, but he's fierce. And I've had many occasions when I'm with the three of them together, that coffee or breakfast or dinner or something, and it is fascinating to hear him talk. It's wonderful. And I like the fact that some of my best friends are environmental lawyers. Not some, all my best friends are environmental lawyers. And Jim has infused me with a whole new layer and level of love of rivers as entities, as beings. And in fact, in some cultures, rivers have human status. They're treated as humans. But that would never happen in this culture, because then you couldn't exploit it. So although you could, people are exploited all the time.
Yeah, the concept of giving non-human creatures, and I don't like the term natural resources because it sounds like you could bag it up and take it from a grocery shelf.
Yeah.
But to give all those things standing is interesting, that it's such a radical notion.
That's true in Jim's book, The Mound People, and his novel that just came out. It's a beautiful book about just that very thing, about a judge who comes to his senses. We get to see his inner workings as a judge, and also as a human being, as a spiritual being, who's very concerned about justice and the natural world. It's a fascinating look, and it's a reminder that people that people that have a conscience can have an effect on the world.
And you've set me up with a really good segue to go back to talk about Skink. One of the things to me that's so interesting about Skink, Carl Hyacint's character, is that he just disappeared because he couldn't stand the mendacity that was built into the job of being governor of the state of Florida.
Mm-hmm.
So he went AWOL. He disappeared into the swamps. And it was only then he could act with authenticity. Interestingly enough, our friend the Mad Angler also goes AWOL, and that just happens to be one of the other poems I'm wondering if you could read.
Sure, I'd love to. I even went to the trouble of marking these. Isn't that something? That never happens. I was thinking that in this Skink character, who I don't know, who I'm embarrassed to say I don't know, and now I'm really tweaked by this.
Mm-hmm.
His desire to just disappear
Mm-hmm.
is really understandable, and there's literary precedent for that. I think when you're asking me about the lineage of the Mad Angler, part of the Mad Angler goes back to the Japanese poet or the Chinese poet Han Shan, who Gary Snyder translated in the Cold Mountain poems, and he just disappears. He writes his poems on walls and stuff, and he just disappears. And so there's something in that disappearance that is powerful to me, because that's what I want to do. If I could, I would.
Every once in a while, Skink will come out, and he's a great literary device for helping move Carl Hyacint's stories along. He brings about a fair amount of retribution in some very clever ways.
Mm-hmm. The other person that comes to mind, and I've been thinking about this guy a lot, is the other one of the close relatives of the Mad Angler is George Hayduke in the Monkey Wrench game.
Yeah.
I mean, that book is that book is a Bible.
It is.
For how to confront mechanized destruction of the earth.
Well, the Mad Angler's in good company.
Yeah, thanks. Okay, here's the Mad Angler going AWOL. Hard to imagine him gone more feral, wandering thickets in search of brook trout, miles from his truck, bent down and crawling through swamp muck, his possessions long ago sold off, his name expunged from public records, his birth certificate altered to his alias, Mad Dog, no last name. He spends his nights at small campfires, eating what he catches or steals from gardens, his life imagined as a tapestry of heroic adventures, dangerous attempts every night, ingesting hot coals to find their meaning, drinking deeply from stagnant water to replenish his tattered imagination, his arms and legs rubbed raw from thrashing through miles of lost territory, those places inside him where he dwells on his errors, the map inside him curling toward its center, the compass spinning in his wild head. So there is that, I was joking a minute ago about, writers want to be, they want to be read and heard, but they don't want to be bothered. And I really feel that the older I get, the more I feel that. Mm-hmm. And it's very difficult because, I lost my wife a couple years ago, and she was adamant that I not isolate myself. But I don't like to leave the yard, I just don't. When I'm at the river, everything goes away. It just ceases to exist. And that's a fantasy. That's a romance. That's a Jim Harrison fantasy. I'm the lone rider in the woods.
Hmm.
Which doesn't work, by the way. Uh, but there is something to that, to being separate
Hmm.
from everything, all the chaos. And when you just stop and look at uh, the world right in front of you, that's all you need. You don't need anything else.
The subtext of the Mad Angler poems, though, is about getting wet, which is
Mhm.
to say, directly experiencing the world. You couldn't have written any of these poems without directly experiencing the water, the river, and fishing it.
Mhm.
And you can't you can't avoid the old cliche that teachers tell their writing students to write what you know.
Mhm.
So we live in a time where things have become more and more abstract, and we have fewer and fewer, we make fewer and fewer choices to directly experience things. So talk about that direct experience aspect of these poems, especially in our current time.
There's an idea from Gary Snyder, and I remember him saying this when he was at Interlochen, talking to our students. Excuse me. And he said the real work is to see the world as real as it is and to find ourselves as real as we are in it. And if you got up every day and that was your mantra, that would have a marked effect on how your life went on after you understood that. Yeah, if you can't, if you don't know it, it's if you don't know it, if you don't know the weather, like there's a great photographer, Mark Lindsay. I don't know if you know Mark's work uh, in the Traverse City area, and his work is beautiful. And it's one of the reasons it's beautiful is because he goes out in all kinds of weather and takes pictures. So the pictures are they just exude that experience that he's there. And if you don't have if you can make stuff up. I mean, that's what fiction is. But you got to make people believe it. And if you I taught a workshop once, and there was a guy, it was an adult workshop, and a guy had a poem about going swimming in Lake Superior. And I probably shouldn't say this, but it was a poem that probably shouldn't have been written. But he wrote it and he read it and we talked about it. And everybody was very uncomplimentary. And I don't let students defend their work, but I could see he was really frustrated. And so I said to him, have you ever been in Lake Superior? And he said, well, I put my toe in it once. And that was the tell. That was the tell.
Mhm.
The only way to feel that is to go get hypothermic and maybe not live. Or if you do live, write a poem on it. Uh, so I don't know where I was going somewhere with that. But I can't remember where I was going.
Well, we're talking about um, direct experience
Mm-hmm.
and the way that informs what we do, especially if we're doing creative work.
Mm-hmm.
And we live in a time where direct experience is becoming as rare as hen's teeth.
Yeah, especially through AI, and there's there you can spot AI so quickly. It drives me to distraction when there's some websites on Facebook or some pages on Facebook that often show pictures of sleeping bear or and they're all AI, and people they just gush over these things, and they don't even realize that it's not real. there's no comparison between standing at the top of a dune and seeing it for yourself and feeling the sand just rip at your skin, as opposed to seeing an AI photograph of it. Which, a lot of this stuff is that's all pablum for tourists, made in Michigan, beautiful Michigan, the myth of Michigan, that, the old myth of the 40s is still alive somewhere. Yeah, maybe in some backwater place in the UP, but it is about lived experience. And to be in a river, to be actually in a river is so much different than watching a river or floating on a river. Because once you're in it, you pretty much better respect what it does, because it can, you can get wet really fast, and B, if you're not careful, you can die. If you stumble and you're waders and there's nobody around, there's a chance you're going to die. So it is a dangerous sport. I mean, it's not like rock climbing, but it does carry some danger with it, especially in fast water or deep water.
I'm going to put up on our screen a picture of another book called, we need to talk about the Mad Angler's counterpart, The Dead Man, another one of your creations. This is a book from 2016, Lying in the River's Dark Bed, the confluence of the Dead Man and the Mad Angler. So this is a really interesting book for a lot of different reasons. It's constructed in such a way that one half, if you're looking at it from one side, you read all the Mad Angler poems, and then you flip it over, then you can read all the Dead Man poems, and then they kind of merge towards each other. And there's a confluence in the center of the book with a combination of poems about both of them. Whose idea was this?
I don't recall. It wasn't mine. It was my idea to get them together in the book, but it wasn't my idea to construct a book like that. Some crazy-minded book designer at Wayne State did it, and which I think is wonderful.
Yeah, it is
at
a
first
wonderful.
I thought, what are you talking about? And then when I got one, I thought, oh, this is fun. And a lot of people, when they see it, they don't quite know what to do with it. But it's really simple. It's two guys, two different sets of poems. They get together, and you see where they have some common DNA. And the Dead Man is he's far more dangerous than the Mad Angler. The Dead Man he doesn't have a conscience. He's amoral, but he's incredibly moral. He would never lie, but he lies all the time. He's completely unreliable. He's an unreliable narrator. He can be killed, but he can't die. He's incapable of anything believable, and yet he does stuff that's believable all the time because he's not afraid of anything. And he's just wildly irreverent because he doesn't take anything seriously, and yet he takes everything seriously. So he's a contradiction. So somebody will read a Mad Angler poem and they'll say, well, here he did this and here he said that. That's a contradiction. And then I say, yeah. So we can't contradict ourselves. That's what I love about him. It's a contradiction.
The dead man kind of, how do I want to put this? There's a real yin and yang thing with the dead
Mhm.
man and the mad angler. Neither one of them are the kind of people that you can expect some kind of congenial conversation with, but they do. The mad angler talks about one thing, and the dead man really doesn't talk, he rants.
Yeah, constantly. The dead man wants, when the dead man knocks, he's just not knocking on the door. He's knocking on the door of your soul. That's what he wants. And you know, the mad angler can be congenial, and you can trust the mad angler, uh, because he has a heart and a soul, and but the dead man, uh, I would guess it's a little like, being with a dead man would be a little like riding between all through Central America down to Tierra del Fuego with Hunter S. Thompson. Uh, because you just can't trust him. But he's so fascinating because he's reckless, and um, he'll try anything, and he can do anything. He can do anything. He's a trickster.
Well, he is well preserved in this particular book. Is there any chance that we'll see him running around in the near future? Is he going to pop
You
out?
know, yeah, he hasn't done much of late. There are a few poems probably buried in my computer which just died. Uh, I think I wrote a couple of Dead Man Trump poems, and uh, so I'll probably go back at it now. I mean, there's a lot of fodder out there. I mean,
Yeah, it's a
Dead
rich
Dead
time.
Man and Dead Man and Elon. I mean, in the comparison, in the meetup between those two, Elon's made of plastic, uh, and the Dead Man is just, he's impenetrable. You cannot you can't hurt him, and he knows he can't be hurt. And so does Elon.
That would be an interesting matchup.
Wouldn't last long.
Years ago, I can remember you saying to me, and this was just kind of a tossed off comment. You said, no one needs to write another poem about fly fishing. So why not? And how does the mad angler get around that?
uh, you know, I don't know if you know Jack Riddle, the poet Jack Riddle. He's a fine writer, very close friend. One year, about, I don't know, maybe 10 or 15 years ago, he sat down, and before he started, he said, does the world need this poem? And the overwhelming answer came back, no. So he didn't write it. And, then he regrouped and started writing poems again. It's, you write because you have to. You write because you think you have something to say. And after that, that's it. Um, to me, it's got nothing to do with, even with publishing, it doesn't have anything to do with it. It's all, everything that happens before the poem, all the experience, all the observation, all of that is far more important than the poem itself. The poem, the artifact is secondary to me. What goes into it is far more important. So, it's about the work. It's not about anything else. It's about the work. It's not even about a book. what's a book? One of the experiments I've done is at a kind of semi-secret location. When this book came out, I set it outside and left it outside, and I took some pictures of it in the fall, and when it was starting to be covered with leaves. And right now it's covered with probably 2.5 feet of snow, and I want to watch it disintegrate.
The Mad Angler.
Yeah. I want to watch it disintegrate and literally go back into the river. All the stuff that it is, all the physical stuff that it is, become the nothing that it was before it existed. And that's a part and parcel of the desire to disappear and hide and just to be left alone.
Well, I certainly understand that feeling. There's a lot of people in the world, but just in terms of trying to do creative work, that takes a lot of quiet in the brain.
Yeah, my brain's never quiet. It's never quiet. I'm rarely bored, and right now I'm involved in a lot of childcare with my grandson Wilder, who I just love to be around. So I come back and forth between Arbor and Interlochen, because Jamie teaches at Michigan. So, but the river is the place, because when you're there, if I blindfolded you and took you to the river and took your blindfold off, you would not think you were near Traverse City until like a Saturday afternoon, when every chunk of plastic that looks like a boat comes down the river, filled with somebody who's screaming. And lately, they have boom boxes or Bluetooth speakers, which I just do not understand. I hear people coming past my cabin a mile upstream because they're listening to rap music on the river.
People don't have the same kind of opportunities or inclination to just be quiet in the woods or on the river. We've always got to be stimulating ourselves with something.
Mm-hmm. Well, we also live in a culture where places like Fox News encourage us to be belligerent all the time, and so the more noise you make, the more attention you draw to yourself. And once in a while, somebody will come by and I won't say anything, and they'll see that it's quiet, and then they'll turn it down. And sometimes people just scream and throw stuff, and it's crazy.
Mike, thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, you're so welcome. I want to also let people know that in addition to the 2 books we've talked about, there's about 10 or so more with your name on it. You've got poetry in collections all over the place, and co-edited the Contemporary Michigan Poetry volume, Poems from the Third Coast, in 1988. It was published. And there's more. And you were director of creative writing at Interlochen Center for the Arts until you retired in 2011. So, dear listeners and viewers, find these books at your favorite bookstore or the public library. Mike, as always, it has been just pure pleasure talking to you.
You too. What a joy to see you again, and to be this close to your just magnetic energy is really incredible. Yeah.
Thank you. That'll send me off for the rest of my day feeling pretty good. And thanks to everybody for watching. We'll see you next time.